the Biden administration is presenting, he presented a $6 trillion 10-year budget over time, right? This is oh my God, what in the world? $6 trillion, trillion. We're not even talking about billions anymore. This is trillions. The American economy is somewhere, depending on your belief system about what the fluidity is of the American economy, is 21 to 27 trillion dollars in money exchanged through it every single year. Let me repeat that. 21 to 26 trillion dollars running through it.
Sounds big.
Every single year. Now, $6 trillion is a lot of money, but only if you look at it in terms of the population of the country in 1951, the number of jobs that existed in 1935, the interaction in our economy with other countries in 1920, right? If you look at it in those terms, it's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, by God. At one point, if we all go back like Marty McFly to November 5th, 1955, nobody has 2 television sets. Now a lot of people have their old flat screen in their garage. Flat screen televisions, which are straight up Star Trek. Can we just all agree on that now? It's not, think about, remember like MTV Cribs in the late 90s where a flat screen was really just, it was a projection TV in a giant box, and rappers had 2 of them, And then we got to the 2000s where they were more available, and then there's like, I put the old one in the bathroom, you know what I'm talking about? Like,
oh yeah.
In those terms, in a society where you're not interacting with other economies on the level where we are not able to, where in an America where you can't sell Coca-Cola to the nation of India with 1 billion people in it and be the primary soda of an entire other country that has 1 billion people in it, buying a beverage you sell for US 85 cents to half of them 6 times a day.
Yeah.
Where, how many of you, did you watch Rachel's segment about the F-150? Did you see her segment about that?
It was a while ago, right?
It was like a week ago. The electric F-150.
No, I think I missed it then.
So Biden wrote in the F-150 that's coming out, the electric F-150, which is a price point.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's an electric truck that can tow 1 million pounds or some nonsense. They've had it tow a train, right? And then a train full of trucks. And the torque on an electric motor is insane these days, like the power that they're able to get into it. And so the Ford F-150 sells, I want to say it like $48 billion a year in business. Just the F-150.
Yeah, it's a huge.
It is, the F-150 is the entire U.S. economy in 1935.
Right.
Let me say that again. If every worker in the U.S. was making the F-150, not all of Ford's cars, the F-150, that's the entirety of the material. And by the way, even if they were making $48 billion as a national economy, no one at that time could buy a phone that speaks to someone on the other side of the world for free. Mm-hmm. No one could use a satellite-based map system to find where they're going and have multiple choices. A free one that comes with your phone, for your $700 phone, but cut me some slack in my explanation here. Or you could buy 9 others, some with celebrity voices.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, people and the Republicans love to talk about, obviously they've thrown fiscal conservatism out the window with their tax cut and with the military budget they put forward. It was a joke. Trump ran a $1 trillion deficit every single year from 2017 on. He just didn't care. And that wasn't to, oh my God, we've hit a pandemic, and we have to make sure that the Evergreen that is our economy, this barge that is turned sideways in the middle of the Suez Canal with tons. I mean, how many tons of stuff were on the Evergreen? Think about that for a second. Think about a cargo boat in 1970 and the Evergreen, and the amount of goods coming from country to country. Like, it's ridiculous. Think about just the Robinhood millionaires that are being made. People using Robinhood to buy stocks in a way, using buy and sell mechanisms available to them that literally the people who made the initial stock market millionaires and billionaires, if they had those tools, would have been trillionaires themselves. Their families would have been in control of everything. Yeah, it was 38,000 tons. Thank you, Bob Carmody, in our chat room. Think about a boat that doesn't weigh 38,000 tons. It had 38,000 tons of stuff. It was selling, and a lot of it, relatively disposable. I mean, there's a growth industry in landfill just getting rid of items in our economy that kings would have killed to touch once. 300 years ago, that we go, I got a new one. I had these headphones, and they link up to my phone automatically and stuff, and I can talk to them and ask questions. If I ever don't know anything, I can go, hey Siri, what did I? And if a king had an Apple HomePod that actually was hooked up to some magical internet, the power available is insane, right? So when they start clamoring about $6 trillion, well, what's that $6 trillion for? And when the Republicans use it, it's to give a tax break to the wealthiest among us, namely corporations, because that was the permanent one. And then the other half of it goes to the military-industrial complex to make and buy new military equipment that we don't need.
No.
And that we are ultimately, just to keep it from being a huge hole in the budget, selling to countries that we would never sell military gear to before. Hello, Abraham Accords. I mean, that $50 billion in military stuff to the UAE, Bahrain, and I think Qatar. Like, there was one other country they were working with. None of them were, by the way, had anything to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I don't know what. That's another can of worms. That ceasefire is at least holding. That's a good sign, right? As we lead into the Memorial Day weekend. But so, what have the Democrats come forward with in this budget proposal? This $6 trillion budget that they put together, which is, of course, in the American Rescue Package was $1.9 trillion. There's a $4 trillion infrastructure, jobs, and economic proposal on top of that is effectively the push for the budget. The jobs plan is, of course, converting us to wind, solar, geothermal, renewables. That will eventually mean, by the way, either micronuclear or thorium reactors or more efficient nuclear reactors. Don't get me started on molten salt. But
it sounds delicious.
It's not. It burns, actually. It's very uncomfortable. It goes right through you. I'm just going to say. It burns twice. Molten salt. There are a lot of technologies that are the technologies of the future. That the kind of stuff that will get us off Earth, the kind of stuff that will cure diseases, the kind of stuff that will protect us from infection, the kind of stuff that will maintain the environment while taking pollutants out of the air so that everything downwind isn't murdered by it. So that, it's great. You got a coal field, you got this, this coal mine and all this leftover coal dust that's part of, you extracting that stuff that just kind of sits there, and a good rain comes along, and then suddenly Eastern Kentucky has, 45 years of cancer clusters and birth defects. That's not West Virginia's problem, right? It's not, right, Joe Manchin? That's not West Virginia's problem. That's, they take care of their stuff. They make sure that the coal sleuth is stored, the ash and everything is stored near the West Virginia border. It doesn't go into the state. Your constituents are fine. Eastern Kentucky, though, is poisoned. But then, Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul don't even have to bother worrying about those people voting anymore because they don't have any money or influence. They're just poor white trash who are, born with one eye or, fingers fused together. Who cares? They're not the horse owners in Lexington and Louisville. They're not the people who are going to donate. They're just years and years of inbreeding and birth defects and poisoning that have just destroyed an entire community. But it's not West Virginia's problem. Now we recognize that wind, solar, geothermal, and all that. By the way, there's tons of geothermal in Eastern Kentucky. That had we been moving towards that for years, the number of lives that would have been saved, the number of babies not born with birth defects, the number of humans that would be operating with their full faculties and not being given external disabilities beyond their control because of how we chose to extract energy, because we had no other choice at that time. We didn't know the damage we were doing. There's a certain point where the petrochemical industry and all that kind of stuff, they knew. But before that, it was the growth of energy, and we're like, holy smokes, oil, you can burn it for this, you can burn it for that. We've been burning oil in oil lamps forever. What's the big problem? This is amazing. And once you find out, you go, okay, how can we better ourselves? Well, it's going to take time to tip this over, and it's going to need help. That's in the American Jobs Plan. That's the kind of stuff the Democrats present when they're in power, when they're governing, and they present a big budget outlay, not a $2 trillion tax break for rich people who don't need it to buy another one of something they already have that they already don't use.
And they get the people who will never be affected by those tax cuts to agree with them and to fight for them.
Right, because it's the lotto mentality. We got to take a break. Yeah. But when the idea is if I ever win, I don't want the government taking half my stuff. Well, that's not how it works. And a lot of people, the reason why we think that is because the government doesn't, and there's all sorts of variant tax law about how you do this. And this would be the change I think you could actually pass through. I have an idea on taxation, on big money exchanges that, some of it exists already, but it could be expanded or at least vocalized more. That would take that group of people, the one time I'm going to win the lotto, this is going to happen to me, I'm going to make it, I'm going to strike it rich crowd and make them wake up to the fact that they're being used by the people who don't strike it rich, who are born rich and keep staying rich and just their money's making money on money. That's right. We'll be back right after this. So a lot of the budget itself that, the White House put forward it's huge. There's a lot to, and I don't mean it's huge in just its amount, but I'm going to slide it over on the screen for people in the chat to look at with me. But this is for fiscal year 2022. Budget of the United States. This is a whole, this is a real document. This is not, we'll do a continuing resolution and pretend everything's fine. Tack, right?
Do your own research.
Yeah, right.
You obviously haven't done your research.
So they are doing such a smart thing in the actual budget itself, in that the table of contents only has 6 elements. Now there's a lot of stuff in there, right? But the table of contents is pretty easy. 1, budget message of the president. 2, confronting the pandemic and rescuing the economy. That's the primary thing. That's what their raison d'etre currently is. Building back better, which is the next phase. Delivering results for all Americans through equitable, effective, and accountable government. Cool. So you want to know where the money's going. You want to make sure that everybody gets a shot at it if they're looking to be a government contractor, and that underserved communities aren't continually being underserved. And by the way, if you're underserved, that's not affirmative action or any kind of stuff like that. It means you're literally not getting your fair share. Yeah. So there is a level on. It is not like, well, they're there where they are, and now they're getting more, and that's unfair. No. They're getting less, and now they're going to get the same amount. That's what's actually happening. Okay, summary tables, and then the OMB contributors to the 2022 budget, which is the people who broke it down and all that kind of stuff. This is the right-wing talking point freak out is off the charts about this budget, right? The clamoring that, oh my God, it's the trillions. Oh, the trillions. Meanwhile, Trump dumped nearly $8 trillion on the economy last year alone. And he was, by the way, do you remember what his arguments with Jerome Powell? Everybody forgets this. Remember Trump's complaint about the Fed that we should have a negative interest rate?
No, I don't remember that, but that sounds about right.
On and on and on. I'll even, let's see, Powell, Trump, negative interest. This is May 12th, 2020. Powell is expected to quash idea of negative rates even as Trump says U.S. would benefit. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell is expected Wednesday to discuss his view of the economy and the Fed's policy actions, but market pros are waiting to hear him say the Fed has no plans for negative interest rates. There was never, nobody's doing that. We're not going to pay banks to print money. It's bad enough that you allow them to print it for a very, a tiny margin, right? You can loan it into existence at a very low margin, but there's got to be a margin there. And the more, by the way, this is the other thing. The more money that gets loaned into existence, this whole all they're doing is printing money. As you lower that interest rate, you can loan more money into existence, but the Fed makes more money because there's more money in circulation. Eventually, that money gets paid back and it no longer exists. That's where they buy securities. That's the idea, that it goes out and you start raising the interest rate again. But when you lower that, there's a lot more out there. You're getting a thinner slice of a larger pie, but the slice of the pie you're getting is still enormous. It's in many cases bigger than the giant piece of a smaller pie you were getting before, as far as interest rates the Fed gets, right? So that's the balance they're always walking. There's no way that that Powell was gonna go for that ever. So Trump tweeted that the U.S. would benefit from negative interest rate, meaning investors would pay the Treasury to hold U.S. debt. The market, for the first time, priced in a negative Fed funds in the futures market last week as investors speculated the Fed could change its mind and at some point in favor of negative rates, that they were going to listen to Trump. And they were never going to. I'm just telling you. That's everybody. There was a bunch of people going, look, he's pressuring people and we got to do something because we're going to get, his followers are psychos and they're virulent in the Republican side of the economy, or in the Republican side of the House and Senate. So we're going to have to placate that a little bit. We'll drive it down some. But we were entering a downturn, last February. And everybody was telling him this before the pandemic hit, before all this stuff happened. It's why he was in a race to sign his Chinese trade deal. It's why he was he held off on dealing with the pandemic because he was afraid it would wreck the stock market. Because all the signs already pointed to we were heading towards a deficit or towards a recession.
Right.
And that there was a real problem there. And that's why he kept going after Jerome Powell and complaining that Powell wouldn't get us negative interest rates and bring us back. Right? That's what his economy was roaring, and now Powell's going to ruin it because the chickens were going to come home to roost. All of his just abstract spending on everything was going to blow a hole in the budget and also not go anywhere because it was all government spending on stuff we didn't need. We need roads. Do we need that many more battleships? That's the question. And this is probably the fight between what would arguably be the Trumpsters and the Progressive Caucus. Outside of the realm of what you think is infrastructure, does paying people to build battleships for a war we're not going to be in and that we're not going to fight, we're going to use other types of ships if we need them at all. We're not going to use these. We're going to use aircraft carriers. Why do we need more battleships when aircraft carriers are so much more capable and they deliver, more of what we need? Isn't that the same if you were using reconciliation to pass your budget and go, yes, this is part of infrastructure? Isn't that the same as childcare on the part of the Progressive Caucus? Building childcare centers for people to use for free. Because that gets them to work. People can, have a place to park their kid while they go to work. And their kid is getting a nutritious meal and a little bit of instruction and being treated very nicely. And then they pick them up after work uninterrupted and have a nice family meal and talk about their day. If that was available to all communities, does it mean all communities will use it the same? No. But if it's available, is that part of infrastructure? Is that a necessary part? Or is that just a perk? Membership has its privileges in being an American citizen. The American Express part of being a citizen. Yeah, no. Is it socialism? Is it capitalism? Is not part of the question. We're a rich nation. Socialism or capitalism aside, our nation is so great. We, as a democracy, have been decided we can use our tax dollars, because we have more of them than other countries, to make sure that the poorest among us have food, shelter, childcare, jobs creation, education, those kind of things. Not because it's socialism or capitalism fighting each other over how these governments work, but because membership has its privileges. Citizenship has its privileges, right? That's what makes America great. It's not that should people be paid by the government to go to work, or should the government supply people with child care or any of that kind of stuff, but that as the richest nation in the world, because we allow for these other freedoms and these giant tax breaks for corporations, yada, yada, we have so much money, and we do, that instead of building battleships, we spend more money on, cyber warfare, because that's the battlefield of the future, and we can educate our kids because we're going to need smarter soldiers, not just cannon fodder, like, we used to send into battle and just go, well, if they don't come back, it's one less person flipping burgers, right? That's how, sending poor kids to war, right? Yeah. And by the way, the whole, oh my God, the Army and the CIA are going woke. You want to know the background, the reason why those ad campaigns are happening right now? I'll tell you after the break. We got to take a break right now. See what I did there? I think bloop, nice. And then I reeled it in. And all that kind of stuff.
All excited.
Thanks for listening, and thanks for supporting the show. By the way, don't forget you can super chat at infotainmentwars.com, and you can also become a member at twitch.tv/HalSparks. You can subscribe there. If you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, it doesn't cost you anything. You can subscribe at Twitch, support the show. If your kid's on Twitch and they're like, use your subscriber thing to subscribe there. Just help us out. They'll show you how it works. You'll have your 13-year-old talk you through it. And of course, you can also become a Patreon. Our goal is 1,000 patrons. That would make us have 1/18 the number of the lowest rung right-wing YouTube channel. Just saying. 1,000. I mean, and half of that of people who do watercolors for a living. I'm just saying. I know we're fledgling, so I can complain, but 1,000 would be great. We'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.